And we're back. Woo! Do you see yourself?
Well, yeah, I see myself. Angela, can you see us? Can you see us both?
Yeah. She got you?
We're confirming it.
All right. Well, anyway, while we're confirming it, welcome back to Common Mansplaining, everybody. I'm Eddie. That's Christian. You know, we should get like a name tag or something.
No, people, we're going to be so super famous now. You guys
Yeah,
were
right.
here before we're cool.
That's right. That's right. It won't matter.
Generations will sing folk songs about us.
Folk songs. Please, not that. Anything but that.
blues songs, maybe.
Blue song, smiling at me. Hey, welcome back to chat. Whoever it was that just came back. I'm gonna try to start incorporating chat in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, today's gonna be kind of like a laid back session. We're gonna talk about bringing everybody back together in the nation, healing our divide. But I welcome any questions that the chat has. No, no opinion is too common. So, oh, it's Angelie. So, I guess she sees us both. Okay, great. Yeah. Welcome back, Angelie. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the program.
Well, I think every year when there's a presidential election, this is what I've been thinking.
So we're twins.
the first feeling I think everybody feels is thank gosh we don't have to go through that for another 4 years.
Right? Yeah, right.
Right? 2028. And so in that sort of vein, this sort of we're glad we're through that. Every president makes some sort of token statement about how they're going to govern for everybody and try to bridge the divides. Biden did 4 years ago. Obama famously tried to do. We're not a red America. We're not a blue America.
Yeah, right.
And the first time they have a bill that they really want to get through and there's opposition, and they just pound, and they demonize the other side, and boom, right? All sort of good feelings are put aside. Now,
of course,
I'd imagine, right, this is an opportunity again, but I think that it's difficult because even though the lines on left and right are blurring, right, as you say, Trump is not a traditional conservative.
That's for sure.
Wouldn't be his ideologies aren't hard right.
Yeah.
And especially fiscally.
Yeah, he's more of a populist.
Yeah. But his personality, so many people have opinions that are so hard set against him, wanting to deny him, they want him to not succeed. Right? Bill Maher, when the economy was going well before COVID, kind of hoped that the economy would go bad just because of his dislike of Donald Trump. He acknowledged the country was going so well, he was hoping it would come down so that he would pay rent. I mean, it's unheard of. He was at least honest enough to admit it. But it was driven by his personal feeling.
Right. So that's actually maybe a good place, if anywhere, to start the healing process is I'd love to see everyone hope for the best, regardless of who's in office. You know, like I was talking to a friend today, and she went on this monologue about man, I'm really, really scared about the next 4 years. I'm scared for women. I'm scared for productive rights. I'm scared. And I'm like, most of those fears are unfounded. And one thing I said to her was maybe are you using the word fear for a proxy for something else like apprehension, which isn't quite as strong, but are you trying to say something else? And she's like, no, I'm just, I'm afraid, or my best friend's husband's going to get deported and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh man, well, stop being so afraid and start being hopeful. And that's a good start, right? Because one thing about negative emotions like that, you typed to us.
Well, I'm just letting you know. I'm trying to pay attention. I've got it up here on the computer so I can see.
How did you do that? Actually, I need to get on that. No, we'll figure that out. Anyway, but yeah, one thing that negative emotions do is they color your whole perspective, right? They color your perceptions. And so then if you're terrified, right, if you're just literally shaking in your boots and on guard for anything that might happen, then the moment Trump does something, you're going to perceive it in the worst possible light. And then there's no way that you're actually going to ever reconcile, right? So that's one place.
It's the opposite of being open-minded. when fear closes your mind off because you're just in a
Hey,
sort of
welcome to everybody.
irrational state.
Just want to say welcome to everybody. Just tuning in. We're talking about how to heal the nation, how to bring us all back together. I know that's
that's the goal, the noble goal. But I think we've got to dig a little deeper, and maybe a series of conversations about. And our first thing is understanding what's dividing us.
Yeah.
Is there substance to it? Substance. I think there's some substance to our divisions. I think though it has become an emotional thing. Right? I've talked about in the past how in our brain there's sort of two parts of it that are one's the analytical part, one is the emotional part, right?
Left brain, right brain.
Well, not it's even more. It's like the cerebral cortex and anyway.
Yeah, you're talking about.
There's an emotional core, and I find in elections too. Sometimes people. Well, I found the Democrats at the end, Kamala's appeals were much more emotional, and hoping that people would vote for her because of bad emotions, fear, like you were talking about, things like that, rather than a neocortex saying, look, Trump wasn't that horrible when he governed. Yes, he tweets irresponsibly or whatever, but as far as the country was able to do well, it wasn't the end of the world. So there are these emotional and the analytical, and there's emotional things that keep people from wanting to be open to hearing ideas from the other side at all. That it comes from Trump will automatically be disallowed. Now, what I hope, right, if you remember during that campaign, when Trump was putting forward any ideas such like, let's not tax tips, boy, the left couldn't come off those fast enough, right? Kamala started saying, yeah, because she had no ideas of her own. She was taking Trump's ideas.
Of course.
And so if an idea is good, let's try to be open to it and not just be like, because Trump says it, all of a sudden there's this knee-jerk reaction. That's what it's going to be really, really hard for people to give Trump his honeymoon period, his 100 days of let's give him some room. Maybe, maybe things aren't even perfect. Let's let him settle in and give that. And
I actually am seeing some signs of that, ironically enough, and I'm hoping, I'm always hopeful. I'm always an optimistic guy. I'm, for those of you guys who watch the show, I'm a hopeless idealist, you know it. So, I'm seeing people like, go down to Mar-a-Lago like all day long to kiss the ring and get right with Trump. There's a lot of people who've burned a lot of bridges or trying to like desperately repair them and like, put up some makeshift structures to try to repair that relationship. And, like they said, I don't remember who it was that said this, that a lot of rich people are going and paying $1 million a piece to like get back in his good graces. I don't know where that's coming from. That's obviously hyperbole, but it is true that people like Zuckerberg have kind of backslid a little bit in their ideologies. People like even Bezos is like now courting Trump a little bit, to try to get, because I think they all realize like, wow, Elon Musk he kind of read the tea leaves a little bit better than everybody else because it's basically like Elon Musk is the only billionaire on the right, and then the whole rest of the billionaire lineup donor class is on the left. And so they're like, man, how did he guess? And so now they're all like, trying to like cross the picket line to get back in Trump's good graces. So I'm hoping that means though that with that, everybody else will kind of like give it a shot, just give it a shot.
Well, I mean, obviously, yes. I mean, we'd hope people would move that way, and not cynically just because this is the guy who's in power and we want to cozy up to power, but because they realize what Elon did is that Trump represented the way the country really needed to go. We needed to embrace free speech, right? Which is something that was under threatened. We needed to have real border control, right, to have a country at all, and sensible things, and the things that the left were not able to. And I think that there's a lot of, especially on the extreme left, a lot of ideas that don't really have any clothes, right? That sound good, but ultimately aren't something that you want the government to factor into. right? Maybe it's something in your community or in your family, some sort of value, but they're not something that should influence how you govern.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
it's
So
I
speaking
don't
about
think they realize that Trump can govern responsibly, and that they don't trust the left to govern because they're terrified. No deportations is like, it's irresponsible governing.
right, right. So you touched on a couple of things there, and one of what is that? Oh, so Angelique's playing whatchamacallit.
Okay,
She's like
good.
our moderator. I love it.
Oh, okay, kind of.
So yeah,
I
one of the
didn't
things
say evil left. You're putting words in my mouth. I didn't say evil left. I said the extreme left.
yeah, extreme left. Yeah, there's a difference, right? It's funny because people call me a conservative. I am a conservative, but I'm definitely amenable to some of the ideas from the left. It's not like the left is immune to good ideas, and they're definitely not immune to good policies. Matter of fact, if anything, a lot of times I see the left creating policies that would otherwise be great, but a lot of times what happens is, in order to be great, they have to like violate a fundamental constitutional right or a basic principle of mine. But other than that, it would work, right? Like
Yeah.
right, like for example, it's really easy to stop all of crime if you just eliminate the Fourth Amendment, right? There's a lot of things like that where there wouldn't be a problem except for, but I'm rambling again. But one thing you touched on though is that there is kind of like a fundamental difference between the way that the right thinks and the way that the left thinks, and I think it all comes down to whether or not in the abstract you have faith or you don't. Now, I know that's going deep right away, but
The thing that is I would acknowledge. I mean, that's a spicy take, but I think it's fairly factual to say a religious divide is
yeah,
evident from the left and
and
right.
now keep in mind that even when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that it has to be like, I am a Christian or I am a whatever. I'm talking about just like having faith in something that is objectively true, right? That there's an objective overlay to the universe, that there's an objective morality, that there's an objective truth. And if you can, I mean, even belief in existence is a statement of faith, right? Which many people on the left have, but they don't acknowledge it. So just something as basic as that, like just having any kind of like
But,
basic
yeah.
understanding of acknowledgement of faith is, I think, what separates the right from the left. And we can dig into that.
Well, I think that I want to answer his question about whether he thinks Joe Biden will. He's already amnestied some. He can't amnesty all without Congress action. But he's amnestied. He amnestied a big chunk just this week. Forget what section was, and he would definitely love to if he could. He would amnesty all of them, but he can't.
Well, why can't he?
Um, because it would involve changing laws. Reagan was the last one to do it, but he didn't have Congress essentially approve the amnesty kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have to look into
I am not a fan of
the partial
amnesty.
amnesty that Joe Biden did today. But so I have some family members on my side who are believe in God and live their lives quite faithfully, who happen to be I would say moderate Democrats, but vote to the left. I grew up in California, so I'm familiar with the sort of left policy. But they would see what I tell them is just preach what you practice, because in their personal lives, these people live like conservative people.
Right.
They want to live around other Republicans and conservative people.
Right.
But they like the good intentions of the left. The left talks about, they want all these good things. And the right talks about, well, we need results kind of thing, right? So it's good intentions. Anyway, so I think there could be people on faith, but the right tries to put it more into practice, especially as it comes to, let's just try something new or that hasn't ever worked before, like communism or something like that, right? It's going to be very, very skeptical of those new ideas because they've never succeeded.
Right. So have you ever? I'm sure you've heard the the analogy of like the fence at the edge of the village, right? Probably some of you out here have probably heard this analogy, but like there's basically two types of people in the world. There's like the young warrior in the village goes to the edge of the village and sees a fence, sees a wall. And then the two types of people is one type of person is going to just leap right over the wall. It's like, why is this wall here? Ignore it and then just hop right over. And the other type of person is going to go back to the village elder and figure out why the wall's there, if it's there to protect them from something or to protect, something else from you, and then figure out if the wall still serves a purpose or what that purpose is. And I think, that's a good depiction of like the left often plunges ahead without understanding why the wall is there. And the right
often more reasons for why we do things.
Right. And this wall's been there for like, eons. And now that isn't to say that there isn't some merit to being that person that has the bravery to leap over walls, because there is, right? But it just, obviously the very first person to cross that boundary would have had to have done it to know where to put the wall in the first place. But that having been said, like 9 times out of 10, if the wall's there, it's probably there for a reason. Probably.
So. Yeah. I mean, especially, it's possible that the threat has dissipated, but and I think we're for reevaluating limits, boundaries, right? Walls like that, but you don't tear them down willy-nilly or ignore them as this is just something that the last generation did, just because you want to be different, right? You got need to evaluate. And so I would say, like my policy, maybe I've talked about this before, or people who are new here. I think when it comes to liberal policy or ideas on the left, I generally think they should be tried on a community level, county level, maybe state level. I generally oppose or don't think that liberal policies are right for on a national level. We're too diverse. We're too big country to say that a program needs to be implemented in Mississippi and San Francisco. It just creates a bureaucracy that becomes inefficient, doesn't meet the goals. And so I can be talked into liberal policies. I'm not, blanket against them, but I'm a very, very hard sell for liberal policies on the national level.
Right.
So if you want to do this program, do it on a county, state level, meet the need that needs to be there.
Right. Well, 9 times out of 10, if you're looking at a liberal policy at the national level, it probably violates the 10th Amendment. Right. So it's just one of those things where it's like, again, this might be a great policy, except it violates a chief tenet that we've already got in place, a wall that we put up for a reason, right? Like,
well, this is a chance that can bring the country together, because one thing that happens when Trump comes into office, every blue state Democrat gets a quick testimony of how important federalism in that 10th Amendment is. They want to put limits on what the federal government does so that they can govern, right? And as soon as the Democrat gets in office, now they want to. But if federalism can unite us, let the federal government, let the national government have a light touch, be conservative. If there's a place for liberal policy, let it be on a state by state basis. I think this is why Democrats wanted to make such a big deal about abortion on this last election, and it ended up being a nothing burger, because it's like states that want that, let the states do it, and people realize that that's,
yeah, it was like the end of the world.
Worth insurrection, having a bad leader for it.
Yeah, it was like the end of the world to some people. That not that it wasn't somebody codified a ban against abortion or anything like that. It was just let's just push it back to the states. I didn't think that was a big deal, but I tell you, like, from
I
all
think
the
independents
people,
agreed with you, largely voting right that was fine.
Yeah, just a moment. I'm trying to figure out if Kyler is talking about drinking whiskey is more healthy or drinking water is more healthy. Cheesecake. I love some cheesecake. You know what? I had the best cheesecake of my life. You know where the best cheesecake I've ever had was? Top
of the World Trade Center tower.
Top of the World Trade Center. Yep. Top of the World Trade Center before it was, knocked down, of course. But so yeah, I mean, I think that there's part of the problem is the media, right? So part of the problem is that the tribalism that's in the government between left and right. Like, I think half of the world watches one type of media station, the other half of the world watches the other type of media station, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, everybody that watches Fox News just gets slowly nudged further and further and further to the right. And there's like, the biggest problem is any nuanced position, any normal, like, common man position is going to have some understanding of the opposite side. But the
Yes.
problem is on Fox News, you only see what's good for Trump, what's good for the right, what's good for X.
And so
You
people
see,
see
like,
that as spin. It's spin.
yeah, you see, right, and it's not that they're like lying or anything, but it's just they're only
Yeah.
going to show you the parts that aren't embarrassing, right? And there's always embarrassing parts for both sides. And the same thing on the left. You go on to MSNBC, you're only going to see what's like good for Harris, what's good for Biden, what's good for the left, and you never see the difference. And so, I wish that the two would collaborate a little bit. I honestly thought that this whole like dichotomy of media was basically against the First Amendment. It seems like it violates freedom of press. For I know that
Well,
ostensibly,
they can get in there. What Fox News does is they separate who's reporting the news and who's a commentator.
right? But
And
even so, like,
commentary and opinion, and the shows don't make a big thing about it, but they sort of designate, that the late night hosts are not journalists; they're commentators with an opinion and a bias, clear bias. But I think, yeah, it degrades their credibility. That's the big thing. Is MSNBC and Fox News suffer from a credibility crisis, and we're looking for somebody to fill that void. NBC News and CBS and ABC have all dropped the ball, and they've tried posturing that they can step up. PBS,
and NPR, and
PBS, NPR is like could be, but they've been led. Their news director is a whack job leftist that Democrats donates to far left parties, and has tried to pay lip service to bipartisanship news reporting, but it's not credible. And so, if it could be a credible news reporting, I think the country would be hungry for that. I don't know. I mean, the Wall Street Journal was always sort of in print journalism was always sort of the standard that their sources that they would check stuff and be really strict before they published anything. But they were generally seen as a little bit more conservative for doing that.
Yeah. Now, I wonder, how do they get away with? Because I mean, it's one thing to have, right or left leaning opinions, right? That's one thing, but it's another thing to see like every single like right leaning channel, which it's not even that many, but every single one like repeats verbatim, word per word, the talking point of the day.
Yeah.
And the left is the same way. It's like a bunch of puppets. And I'm trying to figure out how they get away with that, because I don't like the RNC literally pitches that talking point to them.
Yeah.
And the DNC pitches the talking point.
It's lazy.
Isn't that government involvement?
It's lazy news directors. They get those talking points and they just pass them on without
but it's more than just laziness.
So that they can what?
It's more than just laziness. That's insidious. That's government influence in press, which is to me a violation of the First Amendment.
I think propaganda. Well, yeah, when the government's pushing it, that I think that's true. That the government sponsored press, but not the government can't have statements, and especially that they can't.
Sure.
The press, right? We expect the communications director for the president, for the government, to try to spin things as positively for them as possible, right? But what we don't want is propaganda, and we don't want them censoring dissenting opinions. And that was where the Biden administration crossed the line. Zuckerberg exposed that not only did they push their version of what they wanted to be out there, their narrative, they were actively trying to suppress free speech and other things, right? So you can say what you want, but you got to let everybody else, poke holes and say, hey, this idea is missing a few counter arguments right here. And Biden did not want that. They were actively trying to suppress.
I got a question for you. You said a moment ago that you had, was it relatives or friends that kind of live a very ascetic lifestyle, but like they
live conservative lifestyles, but they vote. Their politics are with the Democrat Party.
So here's my question.
If what they practiced,
right?
They would be uncommon mansplaining.
My question is this: do they embrace the postmodernist philosophy that seems to be pervasive in the?
I don't think they're fully into postmodernism.
Because it would be
really
very
discussed
hard.
it with them. I have one sister-in-law who did go to an Ivy League school and has a degree in journalism. I think is maybe more liberal because of that, because of her education. But I wouldn't necessarily say their worldview is postmodern and relativism. But but I can see how people can still be have faith and try to live with faith in God and have a different opinion. Well, this is the thing, you see the humanity. They can have different opinions about the role of government. And that I think postmodernism is an ideology that makes it difficult, creates the divide, because it doesn't want to ever say anything's better or worse.
Yeah,
right?
that's impossible.
And wants to demonize when we say, like, hey, Western civilization is, of the civilizations out there, is the best, is an unbelievably offensive take to postmodern.
Yeah, and that is the divide, and that's why I was wondering if they're able to, because I don't see how you square that. I don't see how you square faith with postmodernism. Matter of fact, I think there's even been like popes in the past have stated, like, essentially almost ex cathedra. They're like, no, this can't be the way. And I don't think you can square those two philosophies, because faith requires objective truth, postmodernism requires relative truth. So it's like, that's almost the polar opposite, right?
Yeah, that's why I would say I don't think they're beholden to postmodernism, but they definitely have bought hook, line, and sinker the platform of the Democratic Party, right?
But it's
Which
like,
includes even pro-choice and the LGBTQ sort of political power, which when they themselves live, they don't live that way. They if they would just preach what they practice, they would tell people, get married, then have children, have a job, go to school, go to church, be active in your communities and don't commit crimes, kind of things like this.
well, yeah, there's another. I know I'm harping on the same point, but it's like, how do they? I can't get to that. I can't get
maybe
from.
we can interview her
I
at some
can't.
point.
I can't logically get from faith to the Democrat platform. Not logically. Now I can get to some things on it. Like, some things are, whatever. You can play games with, and you can have different thoughts and different priorities. But, like, for example, the LGBTQ movement, even any kind of like tacit approval of that is that's polar opposite from faith. Because the LGBTQ movement.
Well, they reconcile. They say they look at. I'm gonna get down a rabbit hole here, but so right. I would say a lot of people can follow what we would call a caricature of Jesus Christ. Right. If they don't have a full picture of his full life, his ministry, his doctrine, and they just think of Christ as just compassion, forgiveness, which are big parts of his gospel. We need not to forgive them, but there are other things that are that, and then they feel like that the idea, right, the bleeding heart liberal, right, that the government should fix everybody's problems, that there should be no inequities at all, and different things like that. We would say it's not the government's job to do that. That's not, right. Especially with the federal government should not be involved in that. But they try to co-opt their idea of sort of Christ's teachings and think that the government should espouse that. It's warped thinking. I would disagree with it, but the role, especially of the federal government, maybe our local governments see a need that's not being met and can create some sort of compassionate outreach program to meet a social problem. But it's
hard. It's hard. Well, and one of the things, it's funny. Steve is talking about it. Why did I never see a normal Democrats? I think it's because, like I said, they're constantly pressured to be more and more to the left. Like media pushes them as far to the left as you can go, and it gets to the point where it's one thing I see that happens on the left a lot in particular. They have this kind of like checklist, this like litmus test, and if you don't check off all the boxes, then immediately they'll label you not just right but far right. They'll be like if like what, you believe in freedom of speech even though you're with the LGBT community, they're like, oh, you're far right. That far right guy, like they call people like Piers Morgan far right. They call Bobby Kennedy far right. They call Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
Yeah, Bill Maher. They call Bill Maher right wing.
Old school liberals, right? That the party has moved to the left, and now he's on the right of center. And in some areas, Elon Musk said the same thing. He felt like he was on the left until the left just went.
Yeah, it's like right.
I think back to our hope for bringing, the bridging the divide is to try to see the extremes, especially the extreme left, as not anything that people want to have be in charge of governing the country.
So to address chat, just so everybody knows this is what I'm talking about, right? Piers Morgan is at most a centrist. I would call him a fiscal liberal and a social centrist, right? He's like safely center left. And yet, because he breaks from the left with some things, they'll label him. And there's like little things like if he just happened. I think he's friends with Trump, right? Like he doesn't agree with all of Trump's stances, but he does happen to know him personally and have like a social like relationship with him because he's been news and Trump's been a public figure for millions of years or whatever. And so right because he's friends with Trump, everybody's like, oh, right winger, far right, and it's like I've literally heard Piers Morgan say on no fewer than 50 accounts, I'm not right wing.
Yeah,
I'm not right wing. And the same for Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi, and like this list is endless, right? The moment they break one thing from the left, it's like right wing. You know what? That works out well for the right because the right is very open armed to that kind of person.
What was the saying? There was a federal judge who was famous for saying, because she was very liberal when she was young, like in college, and she had been in like the Black Panthers and some stuff, and now she was like in the Federalist Society and all that stuff. She's like, if you're not liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. But if you're not conservative when you get a little older, you don't have a brain. And this is the left makes these appeals to the heart and to emotions. And wouldn't it be great if we could live like this? And when you get a little older, get a little wisdom, you realize you have to govern and live with your brain, and there's a sensibility to that. And
absolutely. And then I think
if that could be appreciated from the left, that they don't demonize us. They say, how could they look at us for not feeling emotions and not wanting things, that we're cold and heartless, and we think of them as just being not dumb and thoughtless.
Yeah, right.
And we need to just think, if we can both come together, if we can feel their emotions and we can empathize with that, and if they can take some time to think through all the ramifications of what they're actually talking about, that will, I think, could get us, help us not hate so much on the other side.
I would hope so. Well,
definitely doesn't want that to happen, but it can.
Yeah, no, I actually did I don't know if you saw it, because it's a video that's probably buried now. It was like one of my early videos before you were on with me. And it was exactly that. It was a video. I did a survey, a poll between, I like debated 30 people on the left, 30 people on the right, and just to see the kind of arguments they make. And that's exactly what happened. Everybody on the left would challenge the heart. Everybody on the right would challenge the brain. Like people on the left would say, oh, you're cruel, you're heartless, you're racist, you're a bigot, that kind of stuff. They would challenge your morals, which is ironic. And then the people on the right would challenge, they'd say you're stupid, you're illogical, things like that. They would challenge the brain. It was kind of interesting. But one of the things, though, that I think the right has learned to employ that the left often misses is a type of tough love, right? Sometimes being strict, while it may seem at first blush to be like kind of, kind of tactless, kind of like harsh, but in the long run, if it produces the better result, there is a love to that, right? Like I have a
Ooh. Are you saying the
ex-roommate.
ends justify the means?
Well, no, not always, of course, but sometimes.
Well, we can
Sometimes.
have jackbooted leftist stormtroopers forcing leftist policy down on us in a hurry, and they would just call it tough love. Give
Yeah.
me some more examples, some more specific examples of what you would call tough love.
Tough love. So, getting rid of Social Security.
Mm.
I think that's a bad. I think our entire welfare state, in fact, is an exercise in something we shouldn't have done. Now, to be fair, I acknowledge that when a lot of it transpired, it was post-war, so maybe it was necessary at the time. Maybe I wasn't alive back then, and so my father says maybe it was. Um, but I think that it trained us to hold our hands out. It trained us to put us in a situation like where we're not fishing for ourselves anymore. We're waiting for the government to hand us fish. And I think that if we were all a fishing society, we wouldn't need it. That's a better love, right? To teach a man to fish.
That is a spicy take, and I think that's a little wistful and emotional. I don't think it's practical. What the practical idea is for government to reduce entitlements, cut them back. I don't.
No, oh yeah.
We can
Hold
talk
on.
about, yeah. We should have never done it in the first place. I can see that, but where
Yeah,
we're at
one second,
now,
one second. I'm not advocating for a complete abolition tomorrow. I'm saying that over time, like we should slowly phase these out to the point where they're no longer in our, or if we have them, it should be at the barest minimist sense, right? It should be like a safety net. People forget the fact that a safety net is supposed to be just that. It's supposed to be a safety net, something that catches you from falling all the way to the ground, but not from falling most of the way. You still fall until you hit the net, right? Like, and so what happens is people think that a safety net means not that they have a place to live, not that they have food, but that they have a nice place to live, that they have nice food, that they have a computer, that they have a giant TV, that they have an Xbox. Like, I know a guy right now that literally begs me for money every single week, and he's on fixed income, and literally he lives 10 times nicer than I do. 10 times, like literally every single week, he's like, Eddie, can I borrow money? I have to get my 74-inch TV out of the pawn shop. I'm like, what? Like that whole sentence doesn't make sense, right? Like, make that make sense.
well, it's funny because they say Dallas helped bring down the Iron Curtain because people realized that average Americans or even lower class Americans still had a refrigerator in their home, and they were like, "What?" Like we live in such a crazy standard of living here in the West. Like I still feel like here in North Carolina, like I'm living like lower middle class, but I'm basically living like you know
Yeah,
some
we're middle class
18th
now, probably.
century landed lord as far as my luxury level goes, right?
Right.
Comparatively, and so, but it's this, you know, I think it's a Christian goal to not have poor among us,
Sure.
and when we talk about, all right, maybe there shouldn't be as many extreme wealthy and extreme poor, but we get testy when the government gets to decide that. We want somebody who's wealthy to donate money or have their own. We want the poor to
Right.
ask for help,
Let me
right?
go on a
To
rant.
humble themselves and ask for help rather than just feel entitled. I'm entitled that the government gives this to me. That I think is something, at least on the right, that we're uncomfortable with. And we'd rather have charity. We'd rather have the rich man change himself and like Scrooge and give alms and or invest in things that will help his fellow man. And we really want the
Can
poor
I can
to
I just hop in here? I
yeah,
just want to.
please.
I don't want to lose the chat here, but yeah. So
Sure.
Isaac, one of the things that you're hearing is he's saying, like that there should be charity and that should solve the problem. You have no idea how much charity is out there. There is literally $1 trillion donated in America every single year. $1 trillion. Some people don't even realize how much money that is. That is an outrageous amount of money. And so when the people are like, the poor are screaming for help, though the poor have help. Now, some of them don't avail themselves of it, and that's a different problem. I think the problem there is like probably mental health and things like that. And there's things that we can do. That's what the safety net is for. That's what the safety net is for. But now the other thing too is, I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head when it's different when a government does it than when a person does it for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's I don't know if you guys, anybody who we just passed Christmas, right? Everybody who gave a Christmas gift, imagine that feeling that you felt when you give gifts to other people, right? It's like another world. It brings you grace. It brings you like this amazing feeling that you have made somebody else feel good, right? That's completely missing in a government program, even at the local level, which I would sort of accept, right? And not only that, it also puts that other person in a place where they're now very thankful to you. There's a personal relationship. You've gotten closer, right? They may even feel beholden to you. They may feel like they want to return the favor someday if you ever need it, right? There's a lot of like this kind of tightly knit society is what we used to have as a bedrock, right? And family units taking care of their family. Like, well, my father and mother are getting old. I'm gonna take care of them if they need it. I'm not gonna put them on social program because that's just not how it was supposed to be, right? Not only that, I wouldn't want anybody else taking care of my parents, but
it's supposed to be a last resort. I mean, that's
absolutely, absolutely. And there's something else here that I'm missing too, and it is when all right. Again, this is like a situation where a program might do good, but for a chief tenet that it violates, right? If you have to steal from one person to give to another, then you violated a chief tenet. You violated my right to pursue property. You violated my right to happiness, right? That's one of our unalienable rights. Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't come off that money because I do all the time. I give to charity all the time. But that doesn't mean I want somebody coming over here to make me do it. That's a whole nother level. And I would never dream. And here's what I tell people, like, if you're the kind of person that thinks that the government should steal, then you go do it. And no, I don't mean that seriously. But I'm just saying, like, if you're that kind of person that you can rationalize stealing, then it's no different for the government to do it than for you to do it.
Yeah, so I would I would agree with you, Eddie. I would disagree with Eddie that I think ownership is part of what Western society has done that's enabled wealth and enabled us to live so opulently, and the lack of property just brings poverty to everybody. And it's hard to maybe it's hard to see that what we really, I think if we're going to close this divide, one of the big things is we have to get rid of covetousness. It's why it's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not covet. That means we can't sit back here and like saying, I want all of Elon's money and all this stuff. We have to deal with, like, be happy with what we have.
I do want
what?
I do want all of Elon's money.
Well, the government, when the government covets billionaires' money and covets other people's money, it's unseemly, right? That rather than just keep within themselves, budget, have a balanced budget, the revenues they have, try to be efficient in how they administer that, rather than coveting, oh, this guy has more money than I think he should have. I'm angry at, and try to go get that from him. I don't think that's a healthy perspective, and I think it bleeds over. The left for years and years and years used to demonize the rich. Now the rich are more leftist, and so they're struggling with that. But they always wanted to covet the wealthy's money. And we on the right want to say, no, we just want opportunities. We just want a chance to live honestly without corruption, and then we can succeed. And not covet our neighbors' gold and assets, etc.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like I mean, I agree with you 100% that we shouldn't covet other people's goods. I don't think that it's ever a bad thing to gain property, especially if you're generating that wealth yourself, right? I think that's just one of the fundamental. Now, it's an interesting philosophical item to discuss because it kind of delves into what constitutes a right to begin with, like what constitutes what people call a right.
What
Now,
is human right? Yeah, we can get down to that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've always said is that the definition of a right is a tool we need to either serve the community or serve God, right? And so property is one of those tools. It's not a bad thing if we can serve God or the community with it. Now, you also need life to do that, right? Like that's where these rights, unalienable rights, come from, right? That's where because there's nowhere in the Bible that our Creator says that these are the rights. But what we've done is you can look over the Bible, you can look over faith, and you can realize in order to serve community, in order to serve God, these are the things you need. You need life, you need liberty, you need the pursuit of property. You don't need happiness. I don't like that Jefferson changed it.
Well, what the scriptures talk about is when we come together and live in communities, right? There's that social contract needs to bind us in ways, right? We need to not lie, and there needs to be consequences. Look, if we're going to get together, we need to try to be honest with each other. And I think so much prosperity can happen if we're honest, and so much poverty happens when people are dishonest, and it has a multiplier effect in that. But right, that these are, rather than rights, these are ways that we're going to come through and come together and live peaceably together. I think that's bridging the divide, is recognizing, okay, I need to be honest with the people I do business with, the people in my community. I need to not steal, not commit adultery, not covet. I need to not be, right. All these things I need to, honor my parents. These are things that are going to allow our communities to live together, right?
Yep, and honor your contracts.
Yeah.
Honor your contracts.
No, there's
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because just as Gavin was talking about personal rights, I kind of wanted to maybe change the subject a little bit and talk about.
Well, one more thing I had on this real quick.
Oh yeah, please.
Let me just like nail put the nail in the coffin here. One other thing that I wanted to note that may help cure the divide too, that may be the difference between the two sides, is, again, there's also the difference between a moral duty and a legal duty, right? And so there's a lot of times where they say, well, we ought to do these things, and that's correct, but that doesn't mean the government ought to do them, right? There's a huge difference there, right? So, like, yes, we ought to give to the poor. We ought not make the government steal our money to give to the poor, right? Like, those are completely different things. We ought to, to give to charity. We ought to serve the weak, or to feed the hungry. The government doing it is a completely different thing, right? Jesus said, give unto Caesar which is Caesar's. That's not us. We do our own work. All right. Anyway, go ahead. Go on to your.
So obviously the role of government and money, right? People talk about government stealing our money. Is taxes are a big reason why we're divided, right? And having a government, if Trump can balance the budget and be more reasonable about money, I think would give him a long leash. We hear these things about these budget deficits, and we just feel like the government's just being irresponsible about money.
Definitely.
And the left and the right, I think that causes divides about it. But I think also we should talk about, I think, values. When you talked about one of the differences between the left and the right, a substantive difference, we brought it up a little bit about before, is abortion, right? And we would see abortion as people that are pro-choice see it as valuing every life as precious, while people on the left see that it's a human right to be able to choose their reproductive or medical decisions or things related to having a child is a human right that the government should be involved in. And reasonable people can disagree about where the government falls in governing those things. But we should, as a valid, I think if we can come back and again esteem that every human life is valuable, that I think is a core tenet that I think some postmodernists or some people that hate Western society are trying to degrade. And if we can, that's a hard fought value that has come dearly and did not exist before Western society and Christianity. That every life was worth living and worth saving.
Yep, I'll tell you. It's funny because in that zone of abortion, of pro-choice, pro-life, there are a lot of like philosophical games that are played by both sides. But one thing I see most frequently now, which is actually, it's kind of a new argument from the left. The old argument used to be that, like, a child wasn't alive until X date, right? Which is like, birth or viability or whatever. They try to find this arbitrary point on the spectrum. The new argument is actually much more nuanced. It's basically like they'll say they don't value human life. They value the human conscious experience, right? So it's very like abstract, very kind of like
I have
difficult.
not heard this before.
It's very common because what happened, actually, believe it or not, it was science that solved the issue. What happened was there was a study from the University of Chicago that they polled 5,000 biologists, which, as you'll recall, is the study of life, and right, so biology, and so out of 5,000 biologists, 96% said life starts at conception, full stop.
Yeah.
Right, because obviously, right, because we always knew this. It was never a game, but because of that, they had to kind of shift their stance, and now they're like, well, it's not life that we value, it's the conscious experience. And I have to disagree. I have to disagree wholeheartedly because of many reasons. Number one, if put yourself in this situation. Let's say you got into a wreck and the doctor comes out and says, I'm very sorry, your wife, we did what we could to stitch up her brain, but she's going to need some more time to heal. So we've put her in a coma while her brain repairs itself. She doesn't have conscious experience at the moment, but she will in 8 months. Now, who's getting rid of that person? No one is getting rid of that person, right? So it's not the conscious experience that we value. Secondly, if it was, consciousness is something that it's not like I either have or don't have it. It's something that grows over time. So if that were the case, like, and many people say that it starts around like 4 or 5 months as a child, like 4 or 5 month old. So first of all, that would mean that you could unalive people that are below 4 months without any moral qualms. Secondly, though, it would also mean that you assign greater moral value as a person ages, which makes no sense whatsoever, right? Now, it's just humans are valuable because humans are valuable, and that's all.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but how do we bridge this divide of people that have taken, I guess, that have taken the arguments and the philosophical that it's more traumatizing or it's more of an invasion. It's more an atrocity to force a woman to give birth than it is to destroy human life. That they would agree, even if they acknowledge, right? Louis C.K. before he got canceled acknowledged he was still pro-abortion, and though it was acknowledged it was 100% murdering a baby. And if you were going to be pro-choice, you need to at least acknowledge that fact. And you think that, and had to be honest that women should be allowed to murder their children, right? Because of what, for him, the line he drew, it was a greater tragedy for the government to be able to stop a woman from doing that. It was a greater role than the murder of that child. Obviously, I agree with you, but when you see these things differently, the individual, we always agree to individual rights, and in America, very testy about the government getting involved in personal matters. This is a very private matter, but it also conflicts with our core value of human life matters. What are people saying?
Well, I just wanted to address something that Isaac said. People use this word. This is another one of those philosophical games they play. They say they want to call it a fetus instead of a baby. Do you know what fetus means? It's a Latin word. It just means offspring. That's all. Like, I don't understand why people use words like that to try to dehumanize the kid. It's just a game that they play. I've never really understood. But all right, so to address your point directly, the reason I don't think that it is a greater affront to force a woman to carry to term than it is to assault the baby, to kill the baby, is because life is the fundamental right upon which all other rights are built, right? Having bodily autonomy means nothing if you don't have a living body, right? That's just freedom is wholly unimportant if you're not alive. So in order to have any one of those other rights, in order to have the right to pursue property or the right to health care or anything else that you might want to have, you have to be alive. So I would say that the right to life for the baby would exceed all other rights at play in this balance.
And that's the thing. Like I think that the dicey thing is, in so many ways, so many things in our society, context is king. And this is, I mean, maybe this is the postmodern, right? The relativism is context is king, right? Especially when it comes to sex, right? Sex is one of those things what, like, in one context can be an ennobling, can be an act of faith, can be a beautiful thing.
Yes.
But always can be a life-destroying, torturous, criminal act, right? Because by changing this context, right? And so what, I guess the case studies, right? People are going to find the worst possible context where human life is created and try to just use that to justify why it should be terminated. How would we say, no, is Western society, even, I guess, I read a book recently, maybe I'll answer my own question before I give you a chance to think about it, where they talked about how orphanages didn't exist before Christianity, right? St. Gregory and his brother, St. Basil in Cappadocia. What would happen if people had children they didn't want or couldn't support, they would just abandon them, leaving them by the side of the road to die of exposure. Happened all the time.
Breaks my heart.
There were these sort of way stations along the roads, like the people would just leave unwanted children. And if you had the resources, you could take one of those infants and decide to raise it up to be a slave, or sometimes to brothels would raise them up to work in brothels, be prostitutes. And it was the idea that St. Gregory created, that they should just have orphanages to raise these unwanted children because their life was precious, and just to educate them to be free citizens, not to be slaves, not to be, sex workers or whatever. Like, their life was inherently valuable.
Absolutely.
And taking a Christian idea and applying it. And the West, so that's a hard one. That only really existed in the Christian West. So
I forgot the question.
Well, all right, I'm back. Right. So we were talking about how are we going to convince, how do we, if we bring people together, right? Because they believe the human right is more important than the right to, every individual has a right. The question was, right, if there's a terrible context that a woman has become pregnant.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And obviously we have to have, and this is where the government comes in. I think reasonable people realize the government should allow, under circumstances like the woman's life is in danger.
Absolutely.
Her pregnancy came via rape or incest. They have to allow some sort of codes for that. That's sort of reasonable government, even if we would draw the line differently personally ourselves. That seems like a reasonable line to draw. But right, where is it a matter of, do we draw a line at all, or where we draw the line that can bring us together on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope, it's a lot to respond to because you've been talking for like 20 minutes now. To cut to the chase, I think I agree with your line. I think that I agree that the right of the mother's life, like there's never been a case in the history of mankind where someone isn't allowed to defend themselves, right? So if your life is at risk, you can always do anything up to and including kill someone else to defend yourself. I know
Well,
that
but
sounds
yeah. Okay, go
I
on.
know it sounds harsh, but I mean, yeah, you're always allowed to protect yourself. Now, I would say I would extend that to cases of rape and incest. It's interesting that people separate those two words because I've never seen a situation where incest isn't rape, but maybe it would be. And if it isn't, like the cases where it isn't, it like the abortion probably isn't on the table, right? Like, but never mind all that. Like, that's just me quibbling over semantics. But yeah, no, I would say that in the case of those exceptions, which by the way take up less than 1% of all abortions,
That's true. I know,
they
but it's their
they take up less than
arguments. The arguments for full no
right,
restriction.
right. No, yeah, no, I do not agree with a 100% abortion ban, regardless of the certain. Now, here's what I'll say. Now, even though I would say that in the case of rape or incest, that it would be okay morally for the woman to protect herself from what I would perceive as potential further assault from financial or social status loss from an attack. That having been said, I would still consider it, while not morally obligatory, morally praiseworthy for her to go through with that pregnancy because the baby didn't deserve what's going on, right? Like the baby has no idea whether there
When
was
you
this.
have adoptions, yeah. It's
So
interesting. It's yeah. So few babies for adoption anymore.
right. Oh,
Nobody's
and
even,
do you know that there are 36 couples waiting for every one child up for adoption right now?
yeah.
36 couples. That's a lot of couples that would just love to take home. And I mean, even if you assume some of them aren't qualified, like that's still like a huge,
Yeah, the
like
numbers are just
more than enough couples that are willing to take these kids. Please, just like, and oh, to respond to something somebody said earlier, I'm not saying that one life is more important than the other. What I said was that the right to life is more fundamental and important than all of the other rights. And Isaac, it's the woman's choice to do whatever she might wish to do with her own body, but not with anybody else's. And see, this is the thing. Like we do this in every other walk of life in America. We have laws that it's always we have the right to life, liberty, or pursuit of property or pursuit of happiness until that intersects somebody else's right to life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness. And the moment the woman's choice crosses the right of another, which is the unborn child, that's when it's no longer okay and a law needs to be made to protect.
adjudication. Yeah.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
that's a good hour. You want to call it here?
I
I
want to
think
call it. Well, my daughter just sat down here.
oh, hey
she's
Kat, what's up?
The abortion part, which is the most riveting
Yes.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
how many abortions? No, I'm kidding.
no.
Zero.
Zero. But yeah, I mean, I think really what we got to think here is if we have an opportunity with a new administration, right, to get back to try to think more about all right, we have a divide. Is it as impassable as we think it is? What things can bring us a little bit together on it? What things can we mellow out on? But I think yeah, abortion is an issue. My last thing I'll take on it, because this will open up another can of worms. Abortion is to the left like gun rights are to the right.
Similar.
That I don't own a gun, I don't use a gun, but I believe that it's really important that if you don't have that right to bear arms, you don't have any rights. And
Yeah.
on the left, they would say the same thing, like if you don't have the right to terminate a pregnancy, you don't have any rights. And I think that's extreme, but I'm trying to empathize with them and trying to see if but I think the right solution is where we're at now, that the states get to draw those lines. They're more reactive. You're on a local level where they can hear your issues, and hopefully people will recognize, yeah, that there are alternatives like adoption that really should be destigmatized and encouraged a lot more than they are now.
Right. Well, go ahead.
I'd like to speak. I feel like this is why.
Yeah, how about ladies and gentlemen? We have a guest on the show.
Hello, I'm Kat.
Kat.
Yeah. I think the abortion issue. I've actually spent a long time thinking about it, and I think really it's great that like men are talking about this, but at the end of the day, I think it is a woman sort of like issue of like, I know that for myself, I'm never going to choose that, right? I just know that for myself. And it's, if we want like quote unquote abortion to end, right? Like some of it will come from the people who vote based upon what their state is. But the end result is like, what are our individual morals, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like, that's what's going to sort of like turn, I don't know. Like, I think it's more important to like teach, because like, in regards to like abortion,
more women just need to.
Well, more women need more understanding of resources, like what they can know. Where it's like I know people talk about abortion rights in colleges all the time, but do they talk about women's support, like how they can care for their baby? Like, is there adoption services? Like, I think it's very important, like going forward, like women knowing that they're going to be supported and showing that support and like and being able to like take that responsibility for themselves, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One thing that I one of my like personal crusades, it's funny in this conversation, what's often lost is like we always focus on what the woman does because that's like the inflection point is like, does she or doesn't she have the child? But just as important is, what's the father doing? Why isn't he around? Like, why isn't he taking care of the woman? Why isn't he marrying her? Why isn't he, right? Like, there's a million other questions that go with it. How does the child, support itself after it's born? How does the mother support herself after she's born? What are the possible ramifications? Like, does she have to take a step back in social standing? Does she like lose a year of school? Does she lose a year of work or whatever? There's a million different things that can happen. And all of them are important. But once again, if you don't have life, all of the other things are always secondary. Now, one thing that I've heard Christian sort of kind of say, and I heard you say a little bit, which is certain people have a greater stake in this conversation.
Yeah.
But I would want to caution against that, especially because, I mean, like if you universalize that out to basically any other topic, like, right, I'm never going to commit murder, but that doesn't mean that I can't talk about whether or not murder is a good law. I'm never going to commit libel or slander, but that doesn't mean I can't talk about what you yourself said you're not ever going to have an abortion.
Reasonable people can talk about their religion.
Right. Yeah. Anybody with a rational mind, like you yourself said, you're never going to have an abortion. Does that disqualify you from the conversation? Of course not.
No, but I think what she sees, right, personal morality. Mm-hmm. If we can improve our personal morality as a country,
yes,
I think that will go large towards bridging the divide. That people won't need to excuse themselves or be insecure, and the left is coming at gaining a testimony of chastity, because they recognize that sex is not transactional. The whole Me Too movement, that women have recognized they have been exploited, that the sexual revolution were lies told to them. And the right has said, we have time worn for centuries learned that women have to be very choosy about who they have children with or sleep with, and that should be something that should be valued in our society again. That might help, again, value human life again. And
value my own human life,
and then bring us a little bit more together.
Because I think that's one like that. I think one of the things is like I value my own human life, right? And that's also why I need to value human lives that will eventually come from me, right? Because it's like I need to like respect myself enough to like be choosy, and I need to respect myself enough to like know that I could do it. Like I could be a mom, like I can respect myself enough that like I don't have to like take whatever.
To your point earlier, Kat, J-Man was talking about resources like adoption, fire department drop-offs. That's maybe not the best condition for a drop off, but it's definitely better than it's definitely better than aborting the child. It's definitely giving at least some resource. One thing that's missing too from society that I think would be, here's me being a hopeless idealist again, but if we can instill a sense of personal responsibility in each and every citizen, right, in each and every person, like one of the things that takes place when this topic comes up, it's always like, oh, I just lost picture on you, Christian.
Sorry.
That was weird. But anyway, one thing that comes up a lot is there's always this initial decision that leads to repercussions, but then those repercussions are what is denied, right? It's like they do the initial act, which is sex, and then when the result of sex takes place, they're like, oh, no, I didn't want all this. And it's like, I just have to say that while this is a unique situation and motherhood is a very special thing, if you universalize this out to every other situation, like if you walk into a lion's den and kick a lion in the face, you can't then say, wait, I didn't agree to be eaten. If you punch a big dude, and if you punch a guy that's like twice your size and then he like turns around and lays you out, you're like, whoa, I didn't agree to be like counter punched. Like, no, you have to accept the results.
Yeah. Well, we talked about, my point earlier that sex is that one thing where the context has a huge matter from being a wonderful thing to a horrible thing. But let's just thank our viewers. We appreciate your participation. Tell us what topics you'd like us to discuss, debate, and go over for our next live action. What other things do you want to do?
Thanks, everybody. Catch y'all next time on Common Mansplaining.